Okay, now here is a long set of questions that are written by a Muslim named Mueza Mueza. And these, he says, are J. Smith's embarrassing mistakes on the faked history of the Dome of the Rock. And I just have to respond to this. It's so much fun. I love it when Muslims make these kind of long comments. And the comments are brilliant because you can see Mueza Mueza is asking perfectly good questions. He just doesn't know the answers. And so he's throwing them out there thinking he does know the answers and thinks that I've embarrassed myself because I don't. So let's go through each one of his. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 or 6 of them. So here's the first one. He says, al-Malik bin Marwan was the 5th caliph of the Umayyad dynasty. J. Smith praised him as the great Arab reformer because Malik created Muhammad and Islam out of nothing, totally from thin air. As he says. Now, I remember, I don't know if Mueza Mueza really listened to what I was saying. I was saying that he was the second of the Marwanid. There are 2 different families within the Umayyad dynasty. You have the Sufyanid, who were the first one from 661, and Muawiyah was the first of the Sufyani family. The Marwanids then took over. Marwan I was the first to take over in 680, and it's his son, al-Malik. So you have 3 from the Sufyani family, 2, and he then, the second one of the Marwanid, he would be the 5th of the Umayyad, but I never said anything about that. I've said he was the 2nd of the Marwanid, not the Umayyad. Don't get the 2 words mixed up, and I think he misheard me on that. Could be my accent, I don't know. But it's this idea that he made up Muhammad. I think you're getting pretty well clear that it's not that he made up Muhammad. We're not even sure that he was talking about a person named Muhammad. And the Muhammad, if he was introducing him, which I'm still on the fence on this, if it was a person named Muhammad in 691 that he's introducing in the Dome of the Rock, and then 692 on the coins and also on the protocols, then I would suggest that this is not the Muhammad that we see of the Abbasid period, not the Muhammad that we see later on, the Muhammad that most Muslims know today, because there is nothing written about him. We know nothing about this Muhammad that is being introduced in 691, if it is a man. So on both cases, I would suggest that we need to be careful before we come out very strong with that. Mueza Mueza is only referring to the Muhammad he likes. That's the Muhammad of the Abbasids. The Muhammad is of the 9th and 10th century. Much too late. He goes on. He, that's al-Malik, created Muhammad by ordering people to write the name Muhammad on the Dome of the Rock. Once Muhammad was created by al-Malik, then suddenly Qur'an miraculously come into existence, complete 114 chapters. I love it when Muslims make these kind of drastic claims. First of all, Mueza Mueza, where in the world did suddenly al-Malik create the Quran? What Quran are you talking about? What Quran existed that's 114 chapters? Remember, we can't even find one Quran by 721. That's within 100 years of within 100 years of the beginning of the Islamic calendar, which happens in 622. By 721, we can't even find one Quran of 114 surahs. We can't find a Quran of 114 surahs even by the 8th century, mid-8th century. Late 8th century. In fact, I would love to see where the first Quran with all 114 surahs, all 6,636 verses that exactly support what we have here, what date that is, because it's certainly not in the 7th century, it's certainly not the 8th century. We're not even sure if it's in the 9th or the 10th century. But nonetheless, Mueza Mueza says it happened with al-Malik. Now, I would like him to support that. There's no way in the world that he could support that. And the 63 fragments that Islamic awareness have put up as possibilities of 96% of the Quran by 621, when you look at those 63 fragments, they're nothing more than just that, just fragments. Half of them, well, about 34 of them, no one's ever done any work on. So these are just pulling them out of thin air. 20 of them, 9 of them are from much after, later, and the others that are left over, the other 20, there is speculation as to what is their date. So much for his reference or his claim for that. Then Mueza Mueza continues on. al-Malik then ordered people to write some inscription from Quranic verses he just created on the various walls of some of the rock. On the south wall, people wrote these verses, and then he goes, this is the verse. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, there is no God but God, he is one, he has no associate. Now, Mueza Mueza, What is that doing there? He is God, he is one, he has no associates. That is not part of the Shahada. He has associate is a different Shahada than what we're using today. So already you see in the Dome of the Rock does not equate, does not parallel with the Quran or with the Shahada that you are using as your statement of faith. It is not there. So be careful, even what you're saying that he wrote does not exactly parallel the Quran that we have. And how can their Quran be eternal and have no human intervention? How could God say in chapter 15 verse 9 in the Quran that he protects it if you have such a different Quran? Associates is attacking Christianity. I can see why al-Malik would put it there. But this is not the Quran. Okay? Be careful. Be careful that this is not the Quran. Unto him belongeth sovereignty, and unto him belongeth praise. He quickeneth and giveth death, and his power over all things. The praised one is the servant of God and his messenger. The praised one. Have you been listening to us? We're suggesting that this is not the man Muhammad. This is the praised one, who could be referring to Jesus himself. If al-Malik is a supporter of the Monophysites, if he's coming out of that tradition, along with al-Hajjaj, as Thalame said earlier, it could be that this is all we're reading on those inscriptions. And it's fascinating. These are promoting Monophysite Christianity, which is confronting Byzantine Christianity, which would not be Monophysite. And that's why it looks like that this is an internecine, this is an inter-Christian polemic between one Christian and another. That is still out to whether or not we are going to agree with that or not. But here's the fascinating thing. I'm going to put back in your lap, Mueza Mueza, all these inscriptions that you've just written. Do they say anything about the Miraj? Do they say anything about Muhammad going on the back of the winged horse? Is there any reference to the Burak? Is there any reference to seven heaven? Nothing. Nothing. Yet you will still claim that the Dome of the Rock was built for that purpose, to commemorate that event, to support what is in chapter 17 verse 1. Then why isn't chapter 17 verse 1 on the Dome of the Rock? Why is it not on those inner ambulatories? Why is it not on those earliest inscriptions? Answer me that. It's obviously there was no Miraj. There was no night journey. There was no Burak, winged horse that flies from Mecca up to Jerusalem. And the rock that was there, we're going to get into that rock. That rock really is important. It is significant, but it has nothing to do with what you're saying it is. More on that later once we bring Mel back, because we're going to unpack that in about a week. Then Mueza Mueza goes on and says, the problem is the Quranic inscriptions inside the Dome of the Rock are not written in 7th century Kufic script, but are written in the Thuluth script, which only appeared in the 15th century. And then he gives you a place where you can go up and see this online. Since al-Malik ruled in the 7th century, he could not order people to write verses of the Quran using a script that only appeared 800 years later. That's impossible. Ha ha ha. He loves those ha-ha-has. The guy loves to joke, and I love that. But here's the problem. I don't think Mueza Mueza knows the Thuluth script very well. See, when you look at the Dome of the Rock, look and see what you notice about the Dome of the Rock. They are, if you look at, here's a picture. Look at the inscription. This is the inscriptions on the inner ambulatories. Here's the inner ambulatories. Here's the inscription. Notice that they are straight and angular. Right turns, right turns, right turns. You notice they're almost like a block form. That is early Kufic script. This is not Thuluth script, because Thuluth script, which he is correct, is introduced by the Ottomans in the 15th century and then reintroduced in the 17th century and then reintroduced a third different style in the 19th century. That is correct. The Thuluth style uses curved and oblique lines. Here is a Thuluth example. This is not what you see on the inner ambulatories. And what Mueza Mueza is doing, he's confused. And a lot of Muslims do this. He's looking at the inscriptions on the outside of the Dome of the Rock. I have said it many times. The outside Dome of the Rock was rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt, destroyed and rebuilt about 11 times. 3 major times it was rebuilt. 11 times it was broken down or destroyed. And it was only in 1876 that the final outside form that you see today was created. 1876, we're in 2021. About 150 years ago. That's only 150 years old. And it's those inscriptions, here's a picture of it, that use the Thuluth script. So be careful. I'm not talking about the outer inscriptions. I don't care diddly swat about those other inscriptions. They're too late. In fact, you will notice that chapter 17, verse 1 is in those inscriptions they were created in 1876 because of this very problem. They finally introduced chapter 17, verse 1 on the southern portico because it did not exist anywhere else, and they needed it to because that was the story the Muslims in the 1800s wanted to give to the Dome of the Rock. And that's the narrative we use today. So Mueza Mueza, be careful. Look at your own history and be careful what you're quoting, because you've got the wrong script in the wrong place at the wrong time, which is so typical of most Muslims I meet. Then he says, in summary, according to Dr. J. Smith, Ph.D., Muhammad was created from nothing by the Caliph al-Malik, who lived in the 7th century, but ordering people to write down. And I said, I just completely developed. Then he goes and gives another, what he calls an embarrassing mistake. When creating his faked Islamic history, J. Smith, PhD, seems to forget that when the Crusaders conquered Jerusalem in 1099, after bloody a massacre of Jews and Christians, the Crusaders then gave the Dome of the Rock to Augustinians, who turned it into a church named the Templum Domini 10,099. This church became an important symbol of Jerusalem, depicting on coins minted under the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. It was told about al-Malik, that al-Malik ordered people to write down inscriptions that include an explicit rejection of the divinity of Christ. You're right. People of the book do not go to excess in your religion, do not say, and then he goes through exactly what's on that inscription. And this is his question. Do you think, is it possible that the writings against Christianity were left untouched by the Crusaders for hundreds of years inside the church Templum Domini and survived to the present day? That's impossible. And he laughs. So al-Malik was not the person behind the Quranic inscription on the Dome of the Rock. Whoa, 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 whoa. So he's basically going back on everything he has said earlier, and then he's pretty much stipulating that that al-Malik had nothing to do with the Dome of the Rock. I mean, there's not any Muslim today that's going to agree with that, because if he's going to suggest, therefore, the Dome of the Rock was written in the 15th century because of the Thuluth, and was written after 1099 because of the Crusaders, then he's going to have a real problem convincing his own co-religionists. I don't know of any historian that would agree with Mueza Mueza. That's a ridiculous thing to even try to say. But let's get into this other thing. How is it that the Crusaders did not destroy these inscriptions that go against everything they believe? For one very good reason: they're not Muslims. We don't do that. I'm not saying it's never been done, but rarely do Christians go and destroy other people's art or people's edifices. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get lots of people saying, hey, this happened here, or this happened here. There are isolated cases where that has happened, but it is nothing like what Muslims do. Muslims do this everywhere. I was in Turkey a number of years ago, and I went from church to church there in Turkey, and if you look at all the beautiful mosaics on the walls and also on the floors, any picture of Jesus or any picture of any of the prophets has their eyes gouged out. The Turks do that everywhere. They just deface the faces because they do not like the idea of any of the prophets' faces being, even the prophets' faces being in public. And so they do that all the time. This is quite normal. Take a look at what the Al-Qaeda did, and with those beautiful Buddhist statues of Buddha, and they just destroyed them, obliterated them there in Afghanistan. And then look what ISIS did. Look what ISIS did in Mosul, and going into the museum there in Mosul and just destroying all these images. This is what Muslims do. So I can understand why Mueza Mueza is so curious. Because how could this have happened? Why is it they didn't deface it? He's talking as a Muslim. He's talking like what he's so used to seeing. And for his standpoint, that makes sense, but not from a Christian standpoint. We are told to respect other people's beliefs. We are not permitted to destroy or deface or eradicate that which we don't like or don't agree with. God bless you. Thanks for your questions, Mueza Mueza. I hope I've been able to answer all of them. This is Jathan. Over and out.